Hey there, it is August 18th, 2019, and I am going to show you around the farm, show you what's been going on. I've been really busy this past week and haven't had a chance to film anything, so it might be kind of long because it's going to be an update, but I'm going to do the best I can. Even though I sat the camera out here for about 5 minutes, it's still fogging up a little bit. Here I have the Brassicas that I've started for the fall garden. I actually had to bring these in yesterday because my graffiti cauliflowers right here were totally wilted, like someone had put them in a food steamer. So luckily they came back to life. And then that just means I'm going to have to keep these inside. So I've already got some lights in there. I just brought them out here this morning so I could water them. And they'll be back in. Yesterday I brought them in at noon and that wasn't fast enough. So they'll be back in by probably 10 a.m. Let's see how that basil is doing. It's actually about twice this height, and I pruned it right above where I had some branching, and that's to encourage it to be bushy instead of tall and leggy. And then I also planted some purple basil yesterday morning. And the plan was 2 weekends ago to move some bees, but we had yellow jackets back there. So switched gears and we ended up, I say we, my husband ended up just getting that bee yard super clean and killing the yellow jackets. And last weekend, in addition to cleaning up the bee yard, we got a baby piglet, and I'm going to show you him in a minute. He's a KuneKune. And we got a 6-month-old sow, or so, I don't even know. She's a KuneKune. And they're not supposed to be heavy rooters, and you can see the soil is really soft, but still. I wasn't super into getting a whole area specially set up for her because I wanted to see what her needs were. And if you're dealing with a new farm animal or a breed that is different than what is typical, sometimes what you read on the internet is correct. A lot of times it isn't. So in her case, she's clearly gonna want to root, even though it's not going to be as bad as a large pig. And you can see she's pretty friendly. She's not totally used to me just yet. I'd love to give her a bath. The goats don't know what to think. But because of how she's rooting in here, this is giving me some ideas about the long-term setup. Another issue that's up, I'm gonna hazard to say is probably true of all pigs. I've owned a potbelly pig, I've owned regular hogs, and now KuneKunes. I've not owned a pig that didn't want to knock its water bowl over. So because I work full time, I'm not here to constantly refill a water bowl 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day every time they knock it over. And we do live in a climate that's very hot. So it's incredibly important that they have fresh water available at all times. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our old hog setup, see what we can salvage from that, because we do have a nipple waterer system in that old hog setup that I think, as long as it is low enough to the ground that she can reach it, I think is going to be the best long-term bet for her. I am going to refill this morning as soon as I finish filming, but yeah, in the long run that's not going to be practical. And we found that for pigs a nipple waterer system works really well for us. Brandon just found a gray tree frog. It's not focusing. Let's see. Maybe the...
That's cool.
There he is. Ah, there we go. That got it to focus. Super cute. Look at that guy. All right, cool.
Sitting in there.
All right, so now we're gonna go in the shop and we're gonna get our boar, or what's gonna be a boar. Right now he's just a 5-week-old piglet, a KuneKune piglet. And we aren't gonna eat these two. These two are gonna be for breeding. And then we'll eat the offspring. The shop's kind of messy. Ignore the mess. With little bitty baby animals like this, and even with my goats, I don't like leaving tiny babies outside overnight. There's just too many things. That we do have foxes. I've never seen a coyote in our woods, but I know we have them. He's already in this little food bowl. And look how tame. I have just been, forgive the noise, my husband's letting the garage door down. I have been really amazed with how tame these guys are. And that is one thing that definitely holds true. Get that light cut off. With these KuneKunes is that they are super, super laid back. I mean, I was kind of worried the first couple days. I was worried that he was sick. That's how laid back of a piglet he is. Look at him. Hey, sweet boy. What's he doing? Such a sweet little thing. He's gonna get upset with me in a minute because I did interrupt his breakfast. But what I've been doing, and it is really, really hot during the middle of the day, and that shop stays nice and cool. But what I've been doing is I bring him out when I can. So during the week, that's just maybe an hour or so in the evening. But on the weekend, I prefer to bring him out in the morning because it's a little cooler. So he'll be out for a couple hours in the morning. And yesterday he got a little upset after a couple hours. He wanted to come inside. So hey, baby. And they do eat grass. Even though he's a baby, he already likes to munch on grass. So that part is true about the KuneKunes as well, about them being grazers. And perhaps the larger one would eat grass if I had put her in a grazed area instead of a earthen area. And there he goes. He's so little and sweet. He's got a little bit of food right there he can eat. He's got some water in his bowl. He's in the shade. All right, so let's look at the garden. What's going on in the garden? Start over here first by the bushel basket gourds and the peppers and the okra. All right, so just for a frame of reference, there's my hand. These are two of the first ones I noticed, but because they're on the same vine and so close together, I actually don't think these are going to get that big. There's a huge one over here. Look at this. These are really cool. And I have found with gourds, well, with these you wouldn't want to trellis them anyway because they're just going to be too heavy. But with gourds in our area, they seem to be more prolific if we let them sprawl because they make these adventitious roots all along the vines. And if you don't do that, the only place they're rooted is right where you planted them. And you can see there's quite a bit of dieback. There's actually some old stems in here where if you weren't letting them do that adventitious roots, they wouldn't be able to get as many nutrients. Here's a big one. Now this one was sideways and large before I recognized it, so I did not get an opportunity to turn it upright like this one. And those two are kind of oblong and not the typical bushel basket shape that you're looking for. You're looking for a deep, wide shape. at this one. This is a really pretty one. Really pretty shape. So I counted the other day and I think I have about 12 of these, which I'm pretty excited about that. A couple of the plants aren't typical shape, but that's okay. They'll make pretty baskets anyway. Here's our peppers. We've got some Guajillo type peppers, and then we've got bananas and cubanelles. The bananas and cubanelles I've raised from seed that I raised from seed that I raised from seed a few years back. So third or fourth generation on those, and I just picked these on Friday, so there's not a lot of big peppers to show. And these went in late because rats ate my first round of pepper plants that I had. So these went in about, I would say about 6 or 8 weeks behind what I normally do. And they're doing fine. Here I've got okra. It's going to begin flowering soon. So I'm pretty excited about that. And so I planted some of my quickest, most vigorous varieties out here for a fall crop, which were the 42-day and the early girl. I also tried some sweet cherry 100s. Not that they're quick necessarily, but they keep producing and producing. So I did have some die before I put the shade cloth up. I've got, this one is a 42-day right here, a couple of those, and then I've got a couple of early girls. And then where I had plants die, I put more plants in. So that's a basil plant. That's a basil plant that I didn't plant out a couple weeks ago. I still had those, so I plugged those in. And there's a tip for you. Keep starting seeds, keep starting plants, because you will have some things die. And as you have things die, you can replace them. So after about 2 days, it became apparent that nothing was gonna make it. I did have this old piece of shade cloth that I put over the tomatoes. It's pretty hideous, but effective. Over here I have, whoop, that sun's coming out. It's not gonna be good for filming, but try to wrap this up pretty quick. Over here I've got some Mongolian sunflowers. The spacing on those was 2 feet apart, so I originally had, I think, 4 or 5. That's 1, 2 right there. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that that one is not gonna perform as well as that one. It probably won't perform at all. So I went ahead and put some squash that I had started. That may or may not do anything. That's okay. I needed a place to put them. And then I've got some lima beans in here. See if I can stand where my shadow's not in the shot. Some lima beans, kind of sketchy germination. I think it was too hot. It wasn't a moisture issue. I just think it was too hot because I planted some other things by seed at that same time that didn't germinate. And then I think these are straight neck squash right here. And then I've got over here in areas that didn't germinate, I've got golden zucchini. And this whole bed, I did not till this go around. I do not till every bed every time. It's really, really bad for soil tilth and soil structure to be constantly tilling up the ground. It does mean that you have heavier weed pressure if you haven't depleted your weed seed bank, but you don't want to destroy that soil structure, because once you do, it's going to take 2 or 3 years of no tilling for you to get it back to something that is healthy for the plants. So I tried around a sweet corn. The idea was to separate the tasseling of my maize morado, which is a dark blue dent corn, from the tasseling of the sweet corn chronologically. I totally failed. I planted this first, then I saw, with the thought that I would space it out 2 weeks, and then I saw that it takes longer for the dent corn to tassel. You know, I found that through research. So about 5 days later, I planted the sweet corn, you know, trying to hurry. And just that little gap, we ended up having another round of really, really hot weather. So even though I watered and I attempted to replant, the sweet corn in the places that it failed, it still just did not want to come up. And it's more, you can tell, even the ones that germinated during that first round, they are more than 5 days behind the maize morado. So I think they're probably going to end up tasseling at the same time. So why don't you want your sweet corn tasseling next to your dent corn? Well, sweet corn is sweet and dent corn is starchy, and that's basically why. If you get cross-pollination because you are consuming the seed and not the fruit, it does affect the seed. It affects what you're eating. So it will have a starchier, that sweet corn will have a starchier taste, and the maize morado will have a sweeter taste, and that's an heirloom plant, so I didn't want cross-pollination with that. Sweet potatoes are doing great. I keep looking at them and thinking, oh, I need to harvest, but then I look back at the calendar and I see I didn't plant until like right before the first weekend in June, so they're not ready. You're looking at, for this purple variety, I think it's about 120 days, and this is all the purple variety of sweet potato. So, and that is from slips that I saved myself from potatoes that I grew last year from slips that I ordered in the mail. I've got a couple of the Adam Gherkins, which is a Gynoecious and Parthenocarpic cucumber growing, and there are, it looks like, some caterpillars on these, so I'll probably spray them with Dipple. They're small, but even a small caterpillar, as you can see, causes a lot of damage. And I need to thin them out because there was 3 per plug. Several of the ones that I planted did not make it. I planted one here, planted one there in an old squash spot where the squash didn't make it. It's just hot, y'all. It's just really hot out here, and so a lot of these things aren't going to do that great. I've got, I don't want to say considerable, but this is caterpillar damage as well that you see here. So there's the culprit there. So I need to hit these with Dipple. Got an eggplant that's doing okay. That went in late because of the rats in the greenhouse this winter. And thank God they didn't eat my tomato plants, because that would have been devastating and I would not have recovered from that. Let's see. Oh, yay! I think this is butternut. I think. Let's pollinate that really quick. Try not to get stung by anything. So that was a female flower. And my winter squash, the adventitious rooting helps too, but because it's plastic, there's not really a place for them to do that. So I've toyed with the idea of coming in and cutting a slit with a box cutter in the black plastic, and then putting a little piece of hay over where I cut the slit, just so to allow it to do that. But I haven't done that yet. It's not super high priority, but I really think that would improve yields. Whoops, accidentally broke that one. I think those are just pumpkins. And then I planted some spaghetti squash right here. And then where I planted those tomatoes, I didn't mention earlier, that's where I previously had cantaloupes that didn't do well. And so all these weedy spots on this black plastic, those are mounds where I had melon mounds. And the melons didn't do that great this year. I don't think I got them in fast enough. All right, so what is this hideous monstrosity? I did not want to till this, but it had a good bit of Kogon grass in it. I don't use Roundup. So I wanted to try to kill as much of that as I could. So I've got tarps here. I went through and weed eated. Now I put tarps down, and it's been a week, but there's still some places on the edges that are green. It may just be because they're on the edges. And there's a gap in the middle there that I need to fix, but I cleared all of this out. There was a gourd growing from last year. You know, last year I planted several bottleneck gourd plants, and I maybe got a dozen fruits from the several plants. This was one single plant, and I got all these gourds, all those gourds weighing down, and then there's some over here, and that's because I did not trellis it, and it touched down with some adventitious roots, and it was able to get more nutrition to those fruits despite the disease pressure that we have here. And we have high disease pressure just because of the heat and humidity. This is a strawberry bed. I have to keep weeding it. Looks like I need to weed it again. I do have black plastic down, but that grass likes to come up, and that grass is easy to pull out if I get it when it's little like that. But that grass likes to come up in the pockets. And now I did till this year in the summer. Huge no-no. I broke all my rules, but the strawberry plants were just absolutely getting, whoops, sorry about that zoom. Strawberry plants were getting just completely smothered out by weeds, and they had gotten totally out of control. So when I was going to pull them, it felt like it was knocking my teeth loose, because it was the Kogon grass, and it was super entrenched in the ground, and the ground was hard. So in that case I did till it. This is a cucumber plant. I don't know what kind, but it's come up on its own, and it's doing really good in spite of the hot, humid weather that we've had. It looks like a little cucumber here. And I did plant several types of cucumbers this year, so I can't wait to see what these end up being, and I'm definitely gonna save seeds from them if it's not a protected variety. It doesn't end up being a protected variety, because it's doing really great. And with that, the sun's already coming out. My glasses have been crooked the whole time, which I'm sure you enjoyed looking at. I've got a sun shirt on, but it's probably too hot for me to work in this sun shirt, so I'm gonna go put on about 6 layers of sunscreen, and I'm gonna do what I've got on my list for this morning before it gets unbearably hot, which is to spread this compost. And all of this is vermicompost. All right, we're gonna see if we can find some worms. And this has been piled up and rained on. So they may all be at the bottom, or they may have all escaped. Look how pretty this is. Now this has been piled up for a couple days and rained on, so I think all the worms that were in the compost have probably gone to the bottom. But just rich compost. And you can see that there are these little clumps in here, and that is so important for building up your soil. A lot of people think that you need to till in organic matter, and that's really, tilling in organic matter is really old school. And that's not how topsoil is built. So topsoil is built through the application of organic matter in layers on the top of your soil. So if you really want to build good soil health, that's how it's done in nature. That's how the Creator does it, or whatever you believe in. That's how it's done. It's not done by mixing it in. So what I do when I have the time and energy for it, and it does take extra time and energy up front, is I do a no-till method where I will suppress weed growth through some methods. In this case, I'm using cardboard. There I use the tarp first, and then I will come through with a layer of manure or vermicompost or kitchen compost, and then over top of that I'll come through with some woody material. So underneath this woody material I have about 2 inches, and you can see how there are clumps in there, and that's the beautiful thing about the vermicompost that you're not going to get with a turned compost bed. With a turned compost bed, you get very, very fine, almost powder, or at least I do, in my region, which is fine. I can work with that. But with the, wait for the car to pass. With the worm compost, I get that nice, I get little clumps. It's still very fine, but the worms, through the process of what they do, they've got that gooey slime, and it acts as a glue that helps bind your organic matter on the top layer together. And that's so important, having something that acts as a glue when you're building your topsoil. Whether that something is, I'm gonna squat in the shade right here, whether that something is you know, the worm slime, or whether it, and I'm sure there's a technical term for worm slime, I'll look that up, whether it's mycorrhizal fungi, or whether it's the sugars that the plants themselves are pumping down in the soil into the roots. It's really important to have something to bind that soil together. And it has to be more than just incorporated organic matter, because as you incorporate that organic matter, especially during the warm season, you're also adding extra air to the soil, and that is increasing microbial activity, and the microbes actually feed on that organic matter as well, so they will break that down, and you're actually losing a lot of the carbon that you're trying to build. So remember that if you're trying to build soil, build it in layers. Soil is a living thing. It's held together, and if it's super fine and powdery, look up the Dust Bowl from the 1930s, and that's in pretty recent U.S. American history. It's very well documented. Look that up. That's what happens when you till and till and till and till. And as organic gardeners rely more on tilling because they're not using things like Roundup and seed drills, that can turn into a problem even for a small farm. You know, you might not have a lot of erosion, but you're going to get to a point where when you have that powdery fine soil, the rain doesn't go in, it just rolls off the top. And you wouldn't think that. You would think the more broken up it is, the better absorption it would have, but it doesn't. It loses its absorption. It loses its ability to support plant life. So just remember that when you're trying to build up your organic matter, when you're trying to build up your soil, go with a layering method, with a low till or no till method. And I use low till in my garden because I do find that I need to till occasionally. But I never till the entire garden at one time. You know, so if I till one row, the next 3 or 4 rows over, I won't till those at all. And those act as a refugia for soil microbes, the beneficial ones, the mycorrhizal fungi, the worms, and then they can move into that tilled soil and help build that back up. So with that, I'm gonna go put on a sleeveless shirt. I'm trying to keep the sun. I'm gonna put on a sleeveless shirt and some sunscreen and get a half gallon of ice water, and I'm gonna start putting this compost on some of my beds. See you next time.